Hi, my name is Alex Cash, and welcome to another episode of Politics of Tomorrow. Today's episode, we're going to be going over on how to become president in 2020. Now, Kanye, if you are watching this video is not for you. And Kim, I have to say you need to get your man under control, because when things like Kanye West running for president happens, we can actually make mistakes in our elections. Case in point, Donald Trump. Now, today we're actually going to go over on how specifically someone becomes president of the United States. And it's important to know this because there's a difference between the population vote and the Electoral College, because the Electoral College is actually what gets people into office. Like we saw in 2016, Hillary Clinton won the population vote, but she did not win the Electoral College, which is why we ended up with Donald Trump. Now, before we start, I know there's a huge debate between a populist vote and electoral vote, and I personally do like the Electoral College. There's a lot of benefits to it, and we'll go over that in just a second. But first, we need to understand how it's broken down. So first, there's 538 electoral votes. This is broken down, obviously, between the 50 states and Washington, D.C. How is this created, you may be wondering? Well, it's the 535 representatives that are inside of Congress. There's obviously 100 senators. Each state has 2 senators per state, so each state will get 2 electoral votes from that. From that, every state is guaranteed at least 1 state representative, and which is why you have states like Wyoming and Alaska with 3 representatives with 3 electoral votes, because they only have 1 representative and 2 senators based on their population. Now, there are other states like California, Texas, Florida, and New York that have higher populations and therefore have more people in Congress, which obviously means that they have more electoral votes. Now, you may be wondering, okay, there's 100 people in the Senate, 2 per state, that makes sense. Now, you said there's 535 representatives, but 538 electoral votes. Why is that the case? Well, there's 3 electoral votes that are given to Washington, D.C. in place of 2 senators and 1 representative. Now, the difference, though, is Washington, D.C. does not have any actual representation in Congress. Either license plate state taxation without representation. Now, each state is given 1 House of Representative or 1 congressman or woman given to their state based on 700,000 people in their representation or in their population. That's why the census, which happens every 10 years and happening in 2020, which I'm sure you hear all about on the radio, is so important. Not only does it dictate funding, but it also declares on how many state representatives each of us get during every 10 years when we do the census. Now, here's the difference between the population and the Electoral College. As you can see, California, Texas, Florida, and New York has the highest amount of population. Now, if we did a populist vote, people running for president only would need to focus on cities with the higher population, like California, Florida, Pennsylvania, Texas, New York. If you win the highest population cities, then you would win the presidency, and then the rest would follow. But in this case, if you win all the major states which have all the major populations, as we will see here, these are the top 5 states with the most with the most electoral votes. Even if you win the highest population, you still have to win the center of the country, which is what forces people to actually run for office to visit all 50 states as we're going through. Now, it's important to know that some of these higher population states will tend to go towards one political party over the other, like California, for example. We obviously know California tends to go Democratic. It has for quite some time, and which is why the Democratic nominee and honestly the Republican nominee spends very little ad time and also very little visits inside of California, because we already know where those votes are going to go, which forces them to visit smaller states like Nevada, Colorado, Wisconsin, and Ohio, because those are a lot of what we're going to call swing states, where either they can go Democratic or Republican. They don't have a set history on going for one party or the other. Now, obviously, there's some controversy into that because some of those states, particularly Colorado, is starting to show more lenient to the Democratic Party. But for now, we're going to consider them a swing state. Now, we're also going to be looking at the 2012 election cycle. This is when Obama got his second term and how things went as far as blue versus red and where the states went. The only reason why we're showing this is because the importance of state flipping is what actually gets people into the presidency of the United States. As we can see in this map, which is the 2016 election results, we saw that Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and 1 delegate from the Maine, or 1 electoral college from Maine, to Donald Trump, which is obviously how he won the presidency. Now, I should take a moment here to explain that there are 2 states that kind of break rules here, and that's Maine and Nebraska. Every other state, their electoral votes go for a winner-take-all, meaning that if you're in Colorado, California, Texas, etc., you're going to be, as a population, whoever wins the majority gets all the electoral votes for that state. Not Maine and Nebraska. Maine and Nebraska have a rule where if the population does digress into having a split vote, that they can give one electoral vote or even two electoral votes to the other political party that does not have the majority. However, the majority per state, the two electoral votes that are represented by the Senate do go to whoever wins the majority of that state, which is why you're going to see Maine have blue and red, because there's enough people in the state of Maine that voted for Donald Trump that one electoral vote did end up going towards him. Now, I'm going to show you what my map looks to be. And the reason why there's going to be different shades is because of how the current polls are going in each of these states. But these states tend to show towards leniency towards Democratic or Republican. As we can see, Washington, Oregon, California, Colorado, New Mexico, Virginia, go on and so forth, you'll see are very blue. They are traditionally blue. They have a high percentage of Democrats that are voting in that state, and the likelihood of them going for Joe Biden is extremely high. Same thing for the Republican candidate and current president, Donald Trump, is you'll see all the red states in the middle of the country. They have a tradition of going red. They're probably going to go red, and therefore I kept it as red. Now, you may be seeing those tan colors on the map. What are those tan colors, you may be wondering? And those are what we're going to call our swing states for 2020. These states are also traditionally known as swing states, especially and particularly Florida, which I'm sure we know from the last 5 elections that Florida can decide the presidency of these United States. But these are the states where we're going to see a lot more of the ad spend happening. We're going to see a lot more visits happen, because without these states that are in tan, neither person is going to be able to win presidency of the United States. Out of these tan states, they're going to be dictated by the people who show up for these elections. Now, some of these states do have more leniencies towards others, and based on their polls, they're probably going to go to one candidate or another, which is where it brings me to my last map. This map is brought to you by, and all these maps are brought to you by 270towin.com, 270towin.com. This map in particular showcases a consensus, which means that the majority of polls that are being pulled inside these states and how they're leaning towards and how they assign. So if you go to 270towin.com, they're not going to show up like the other maps that I've shown you. They're going to show up like this map, because in consensus, the people agree, the majority of polls agree, that the likelihood of these states going blue or red are extremely high for these particular states, which means that Ohio, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Arizona are arguably going to decide who becomes president of the United States. Now, in this map, you're going to see a lot more light blue, and particularly with Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Now, I should let you know that 2 weeks before creating this video, Michigan was tan. If we moved Michigan back to being tan, you'll see that Joe Biden still needs to win at least one more state to be able to win. Now, we're going to throw this back to the blue because that's where the consensus is at. Because at the end of the day, these are just polls. Polls are a representation of people who pick up their phone and are willing to talk to someone and saying that they're going to go vote. Is that how that's going to turn out for the election? Nope. Because in 2016, it was pretty convincing that Hillary Clinton was going to run away with the presidency, but we obviously saw that she lost that election. It all comes down to people who vote, which is the most important thing. Which now comes down to the fun part. It's important for everyone to know that only 55% of eligible voters actually showed up in the 2016 election, which of the 336 million plus people that live in the United States, only half of them are actually considered to be eligible voters, and of that, only half, a little over half of people actually showed up. Now, there is one particular age group that is the most important, which is ages 18 to 30. This is considered young voters. On a good day, on a good election cycle, 20% of people between the ages of 18 and 30 show up to vote. On average, especially on this 2020 cycle, we've been seeing that as little as 5% of people ages 18 to 30 are showing up to vote. Now, don't get me wrong, I think we need to make this easy to vote as well. I think if I can file my taxes online, I think if I can get a mortgage, if I can pay my mortgage, online, then I mean, hell, the other day I saw one of my friends take 5 minutes and got a $15,000 loan to purchase a car. Within 5 minutes later, he drove off with a brand new vehicle on that lot without any income verification, any address verification, nothing of those sorts. So I think if we can do those things online, we should be able to at least be able to vote online. If not, we need to put it onto our cell phones so that there's no excuses of why people vote. But until then, until that day can come, there's two main debates that we're seeing: is voting in person or mail-in ballots. I live in the great state of Colorado, which we get mailed our ballots every single cycle, which gives us zero reason why we shouldn't vote. Don't worry, still people don't vote. But at the end of the day, we need to make voting easier. I don't think that's going to happen this year. So in a world of COVID, in a world of a higher unemployment rate, in a world where climate is a huge crisis, I think it's time that we need to take an hour out of our time on the first Tuesday of November to get out and vote. And in the meantime, I'm still waiting for Trump to say that he's going to accept the election results even if he loses. Let me repeat this because this is important. Trump has still not said that he will accept the election results if he loses. So let's make him. Let's show up in great strides. Let's force all of these states to go blue, and let's force him to get out of office. The last 4 years have been pretty crazy, and you think he's going to be just the same the next 4 years? I don't think so. If we give him another presidential cycle, if we give him another 4 years, I think shit is going to hit the fan. So get out and vote. That's another episode of Politics of Tomorrow. We'll see you next time. Until then, register to vote